Shalom. Welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean Mountains here in Israel. I like to refer to it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. I pray that you will find this all of those. Through this program, we're excited to connect you to people and stories in and relating to Israel to give you a window to look through, experiencing aspects of life here that you wouldn't otherwise know about. We want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and send along any questions and any comments about any topic anytime. Or you can reach us at genesis123.co or follow and like Inspiration from Zion on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I want to also mention, as this is a live webinar that's being recorded, for those who are here, and we are making this interactive, one of the things that we always aspire to do in building bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel is to approach one another from our respective traditions, but with mutual respect. And it's with that uh, uh, I guess more appropriately set up for today's topic than I intended, that we're going to jump into something that's become quite controversial. I think quite unusual in the sense that it's created a lot more words and a lot more print and a lot more videos than the simple 280 words of the original statement that was released this past Sunday on the 17th of January when we're having from when we're having the conversation. And it's relating to a letter that was written by the patriarchs and heads of the churches in Jerusalem, referring to Christian Zionism as a harmful and damaging ideology. And I don't want to go into much of the detail on that right now, and I don't want to spend a lot of time with introduction on the topic. If you're following here, especially if you're following here live, you're here because you want to hear about it. You want to learn more about it. And I'm not the one to teach. I'm the one to coalesce and bring this great panel together. So I want to introduce who they are in alphabetical order, and then we're going to really just jump into the conversation. Burdick is a fifth-generation Chinese Christian. She immigrated to the U.S. at age 17. In 2000, she and her husband Bill came to Israel for the first time and were astonished by the restoration of Israel by God and the Jewish people. From 2008 to 2018, she volunteered here in the land, and afterward, she and Bill created the nonprofit called 10 Gentiles with Christian and Jewish friends, inspired by Zechariah 8:23, to equip and engage Christians to participate in God's restoration of Israel alongside the Jewish people. Nicole Jensezian is a respected American-born journalist living in Israel for 2 decades, whose writing has appeared widely around the world. She's the host of the Inside Scoop Jerusalem podcast. In her reporting, Nicole focuses on highlights the Christian community in the Holy Land. Pastor Todd McDowell served for 15 years with the world's largest missions organization, Youth with a Mission. In 2010, he became the executive director of Caleb Global. Todd travels around the world teaching in missions and ministry schools, as well as in churches and conferences. He resides in Nashville with his wife, with whom he has 4 amazing children, and is blessed so far with 3 grandchildren. Dr. Andre Villeneuve is a Catholic theologian, biblical scholar, and an associate professor of Old Testament and biblical languages at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, Michigan. Andre received his PhD from Hebrew University here in Jerusalem, and after moving to Jerusalem, he worked for the ICEJ, International Christian Embassy, and worked for the Hebrew-speaking Catholic community and for the Commission for Pilgrimages in the Christian Media Center in Jerusalem. He's been leading pilgrimages to Israel for quite a while and fostering reconciliation between Israel and the church through his organization, Catholics for Israel. Nicole, Shirley, Todd, and Andre, and today we dispense with titles. I'm really, really thrilled to have you. Thank you. This came across very short notice, and thank you for making the time, and welcome to Inspiration from Zion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
So I
Jonathan.
want to just start out with a comment, and then we're going to get into some definitions. As for those of you who've been following, we just talked about some of the parameters. This has been getting a lot of traction, as I mentioned. The whole letter on January 17th was 280 words. It's shocking how 280 words can create so much controversy. And a friend of mine, I think he may be following here today, Pastor Todd Schumacher, wrote to me, it's kind of hard to believe that people actually need to have this conversation. Just read the Bible, people. It's pretty clear that the Lord himself is a Zionist, and it's not like it's even inferred. It's explicitly stated. So I'd like to start, and each of you can define as you will or pass if it's already been defined. Part of the letter, part of the main topic that I think we're going to get into is the letter from the patriarchs and the heads of churches refers to Christian Zionism as a harmful and damaging ideology. What does it mean to be a Christian Zionist? Shirley?
Follow God's heart. That's pretty to me. It's pretty simple. And we can talk more later. But to me, Christian Zionist the Zionism idea is also a New Testament idea. We can get into the scripture later, but to keep my answer short, so yeah, it's a New Testament idea. It's not just in the Tanakh or the Hebrew scripture, but it's also in the New Testament.
Todd, what do you think? What's a Christian Zionist other than you are one?
Yeah, I think I go back to where it was first referenced in modern history in 1897. Theodore Herzl did the first World Zionist Congress, and at that point, from my understanding, the definition is quite simple that Israel, the Jewish people, have a right to a homeland. It's basically the Jewish people having a right to a homeland, and and that, I mean, the question I have from the statement they gave is, do they think it's Zionism? Is it a political movement? Is it a theology? Is it an eschatology? And so those kind of, because they didn't define what they meant by it, I would just go to the real simple core original definition that the Jewish people have a right to a homeland. And we see that in scripture. We can unpack that quite clearly, but that's to me the simplest definition.
Thank you for that. And thank you for also raising that point, which we'll come to, which is that they didn't define it. So that's why I'm asking you. Andre, you want to tell us what you think a Christian Zionist is?
Yeah, sure, of course. Just building off what Todd just said, if we just break down the expression to the two words, well, Zionism is just about Jewish self-determination in their land. And so you don't need to be a Christian to be a Zionist, obviously, or even a Jew. Anyone who believes that Jews have a right to live in their own land in security from those who hate them would be a Zionist. And so what is Zionism not? It's not discrimination against other people. It's not hatred against Arabs or Palestinians or Christians or anyone else. It's simply believing that Jews have a right to self-determination in their own land, as voted by the UN, by the way, in 1947 with the founding of the State of Israel. Now, moving on to the Christian Zionism, or some would call it simply biblical Zionism, to build this bridge between Jews and Christians. It's simply the affirmation that this is not just a secular movement, that God made hundreds of promises, beginning with Abraham throughout the entire Hebrew scriptures, never revoked by the New Testament. In fact, affirmed in several places in the New Testament that even though God will scatter the Jewish people across the earth if they are unfaithful to the Torah, at some point he will gather them back to their land. And this is probably the most repeated promise throughout the entire Bible. And when I teach, I have some 200 quotes from the prophets, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And I like to say a bit tongue in cheek, but it's true that who's the first Zionist? It's God himself. He came up with the idea. And I have several quotes from the Psalms. I'll just quote one here from Psalm 132, which says, "For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his habitation. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it." So note that he
Wow.
says, "This is my dwelling place forever." He doesn't say, "This is my dwelling place until I form a new covenant and then I'm done. And then I'll move to the Vatican. He doesn't say anything like that. He seems to care very much about Zion. And so I don't think we need to be afraid to say that really God is the founder of Zionism. He's the originator of it.
Amazing. Thank you. Nicole, except for me, you're the only one on the panel who's an Israeli citizen. So you live Zionism in a very different way. But what does it mean to you?
So I mean, there's nothing to add to what everybody said. I think you explained it quite well. I could actually shed light on what they did mean by this. I did a little research today called like I spoke with some of Arab Christians, even evangelicals that live here, and very interesting. Like I understand. Like um, I asked like what their view of this statement that came out, and overall, that what their problem with Christian Zionism is when it veers from a theological position into a political position, and that in this case, this seemingly random press release that came out by the heads of churches was actually in response to, by the way, not a foreign Christian but a local Christian who was trying to is trying to promote a Christian agenda in the Israeli government, and so that is why it was specifically addressed to the efforts of this one person who has served in the Israeli army and who wants to see like a more uh, of a curriculum for Christians, recognition for Christians in the country. It was actually against this person and his activities, his political activities, as opposed to what I originally assumed it was, that it was about evangelicals overseas who come, because they are Christian Zionists and they come here to the land with that agenda. So I just have been mind blown from the time this statement came out until
Yes.
now, when I'm finally discovering like exactly why it came out, why now, what was it in response to. And
So
so, yeah.
I want to get into that, and I think you're referring to the person that Andre very masterfully hosted on his own program, and we'll put the link for that, whether that's the same person or not. And by the way, I would just comment, shame to think of him as being political. He's just advocating for Christians who are, by the way, Israeli Christians. And maybe this leads to the next question, the next definition or understanding that we need. The entity that signed this letter, and Andre, you already alluded to the fact that it's not clear that the um, um, Archbishop here in
Yeah.
Jerusalem, that he was necessarily
Cardinal, right?
that he was part of it. But the entity that calls itself the Patriarchs and Heads of Churches in Jerusalem, we don't know who those people are, and
Yeah.
they refer to themselves, they're in Jerusalem, but they're referring to themselves as over the Holy Land, which
Yeah.
includes Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And so I personally think how wonderful that there's an Israeli Christian who, and I said it right because that's how he likes to be referred to from your conversation, Andre, who's asserting rights for Christians in Israel, uh, which is not only his right, but I think it's critical. So it's a shame that people look at that as political. But I've diverged a little bit too much. What do we know about the patriarchs and heads of churches? Who who can identify? Because Nicole, one of the reasons I thought about you is this was
Mhm.
originally spun as being headed by initiative headed by the Armenian Church. You have any insight on that?
Oh, yeah, no,
You're part
not
of that community.
necessarily. Yeah, it's not necessarily, it's not solely the Armenian Church, and because there are no signatures, we can't tell. But usually, when a statement comes out, the patriarchs and heads of churches in Jerusalem, it's usually the big three. I call them. It's the Armenian Apostolic Church in Jerusalem, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate here in Jerusalem, and also the Latin Patriarchate, the Cardinal Pier
Pizza Bala.
Baptista, yeah, Pizzaballa. So it's usually from those three, with their, there might be others like the Syriac Church and some others, but there are no names on this. So like we can't tell if the cardinal signed it in this case. It's not specifically coming from the Armenian Church either. It could include them.
Yeah. I heard that it was first posted on the Armenian Patriarchate website, but I have to confess I didn't check it for sure. It's on the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate website, but it is not, I could not find it on the Latin Patriarchate website. And it was posted on the website of the Custody of the Holy Land, which are the Franciscans, and it was quickly taken down and it's disappeared
Oh,
within a day or
interesting.
two. And
Okay.
from some of the sources I've talked to, including the target, who's a lieutenant colonel, a Christian lieutenant colonel in the IDF, his name is Ihab Shlayan. And as you said, Jonathan,
Yeah.
I had a long interview with him yesterday. You can find it on Catholics for Israel,
I'll
his
share the
YouTube
link. I'll
channel.
share the link here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to, he was a bit hesitant in pronouncing himself, but from other sources I've heard, it seems like the Patriarch and Cardinal Pizzaballa may not even be one of the signatories. So I'm not saying this as a statement of fact, but it seems like it's not clear at all since the statement does not appear on the website of the Latin Patriarchate. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, but it's also interesting in coming from Israel, and we're also parenthetically to this statement, which has raised a lot of eyebrows. Well, I'm not sure it's at the top of the news on any TV or radio stations here. What is on the top of the news is every time that there's some sort of activity in Iran with allegations that the Mossad is responsible, and more often than not, the Mossad just stays silent. Occasionally, the Mossad or IDF will actually deny involvement. I'm wondering if it makes any difference from any of your perspectives that the cardinal hasn't said, no, I didn't do it. That's not me.
Yeah, as Ihab told me in my interview with him, and I don't need to tell you guys, but perhaps this will be useful for our viewers, that there are a lot of factors behind the scenes in church politics in the Holy Land in Israel, and so there's a lot of pressure from foreign elements, namely from the Arab world, on the patriarchs. And obviously, none of the patriarchs can come out and say, hey, we actually support Zionism, we support the state of Israel, because this could have serious repercussions on Christians in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, right? Not to mention
That's
the
right.
Palestinian territories. So they have to be extremely prudent. And sometimes they even have to make these statements that are actually entirely political and diplomatic. As you could tell from that statement, there was almost zero theology in it. They just called it a harmful ideology that divides the faithful. There was no substance to it. But I don't know if you want to talk about the world reaction of all the media after, and now we're actually talking about the statement itself. But I think we really need to talk about this because it has blown into this massive explosion of commentators, and the church definitely now rejects Zionism, and then the church has never believed in Zionism. And they talk about making a mountain out of a molehill for something that is just such a pragmatic document. We're not even sure who signed it for what. They're not even saying what exactly is the problem. They're not naming who is targeted. So I think there's much to be said about
That's a good
the
point.
reaction
Right.
of
I
the
want to
Now,
world.
I
get I
want to
want to get
ask,
into
oh,
go ahead, Shirley.
I have a question for Andre, that for the Latin patriarchs, they're connected with Roman Catholics, right?
Of course, the Latin Patriarch is
Yeah,
a
is
Catholic
Roman.
cardinal. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So potentially it could, Roman Catholic could all be part of this patriarchs and the heads of churches in Jerusalem.
They
Well,
usually
the
are.
Latin
They
Patriarch,
usually
yes.
are.
The
Okay,
others
Yes.
are
okay,
not, but they talk among each other, of course. Yeah.
Mhm.
okay, okay.
Help
I
me
So
think it would
remember.
that's
be,
huge. So that's huge. I also saw that Anglicans and also Lutherans are also part of this, like under this big
mm,
title. Is that
are
right?
they?
That would not be
I'm, not-
surprising, but again, we're in the
I'm,
dark in terms of the actual
Exactly.
signatories.
Okay,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
just I asked
yeah.
Google, who are the patriarchs and the heads of churches, and so
Mm,
that's the answer that Google gave me.
Yeah.
Um, yes,
So
yeah. So it seems huge. Yeah.
what we've done now is put a lineup of potential
Right.
suspects, and I'm using the phrase carefully. And we're talking about here who the people could be, but we don't know. And which also means that I could borrow their letterhead and might write my own letter and put a letter out on their letterhead and call myself part of the a patriarch. I'm a patriarch. I have 6 children. So
Yeah, but the
that
statement is
qualifies me.
authentic because it does
yeah.
appear on some of the
It's
patriarchs' websites. So it's
it's
not a
on their
fake. I know
website.
that
Yeah.
on
Thank you.
Yeah,
Twitter, some initially said, "Oh, it's
yeah.
a fake because of letterhead." So we can, It's definitely
Okay,
a real statement that's come out.
And
Yeah.
now
okay.
we know
Thank
why
you.
they also put it out. Now I know the why, and so that really explained it for me. But I think it would be important to not just define who they are, but what who are the Christians of the Holy Land? Because I think that like after that, to establish who they are and what denominations they might belong to and things like that, and then to take it from there. So would it be okay if I just like um, because as a Christian American who came to Israel, also stumbled into this myself of just really understanding the Eastern denominations, the Eastern Christianity denominations, so different from of what I understand of the Catholic world, the evangelical world, which is what I would, I would believe in America. I was more familiar with, but Christians, just also important to know, make up 2% of the Israeli population and 1% or maybe even less of Palestinian population. So we're dealing with a very small number. But within that extremely small number, and so minority within minorities, there are several denominations. So we just named a few. We named the big three of the traditionals. There's also the Lutheran, the Anglican, there's Maronites, there's the Egyptian Coptic. There's so many just in the Holy Sepulchre alone, and those are the traditional Christians. There are also some evangelical Christians here, though smaller in number, and some of the Arab Christians or Palestinian Christians or Israeli Christians, however they define themselves, are also evangelical. And by the way, none of them will agree on how to define themselves, hence the statement. But that also the Christians here that are of the traditional Eastern denominations, they are here for generations. They're not like I came here as a Christian and tourists come here as Christians. They are here for generations. They have a very strong connection and have very strong traditions that are tied to the land and to their faith. And for them, it's not a theology; it's a way of life. It's more than just a theology. And so and I would also say, as they are navigating here as a minority, also among the Palestinians, that being Arabic speakers, the majority of the Christians here are Arabic speakers, whether they're Arab. There are also Armenians, and they speak Armenian. They probably also speak Arabic, but they are navigating life here as a minority. And many of them are also more identified with the Palestinian cause, politics side of things. So that is just something to understand as we go forward to discuss this, that this is their life here that they have navigated for centuries, and also maintaining a status quo. And so we talk about, yes, these churches, there was argument, of course, do they represent Christianity? Well, maybe they don't represent every Christian in the world, but they do represent a strong status quo, centuries old tradition in the Holy Land that has worked up until now. Now, that's all I have to say, and we'll leave the theology, to the rest of everybody else. But I think just to establish who they are and a little bit of the mindset of where this might
Thanks,
be coming
Nicole.
from.
Thank you. Right. So actually, before we get into that, the next piece that I wanted to define to the best of our ability to set some parameters is why now? A number of people asked that question. Why now? I don't know if I'm the only one who observed it, but it came out on the eve of Orthodox Christmas. Maybe that means nothing. Maybe it just happened to be when they got the letter ready and they didn't want to release it on Shabbat, which would be ironic. But why now? What was there a trigger? And a few people commented, which is an observation that I had made as well. It's ironic that many, if not all of the people who would be potentially the heads of churches in Jerusalem just the week earlier were sitting at the president's residence, the head of state of the Zionist entity being celebrated by them. Do any of you have any thought as to why now, why it came out this week?
Yeah. Yeah,
Please.
I don't know if this week in particular is there's any kind of trigger, but in the recent past, we know that Ihab Shalayan met with Ambassador Mike Huckabee, I
Yes.
think, last month. And he's been gaining traction. If you look at his Facebook page, last time I looked, he had 18,000 followers. And he's active in encouraging Israeli Christians. We've traditionally called them Arab Christians or Israeli Arabs, but he doesn't like the term at all. He wants to say Israeli Christians. And in fact, he calls himself a Zionist, even though Arabic is his mother tongue. So he's been active in encouraging Christians to enlist in the IDF and to become more patriotic instead of hating Israel, actually loving Israel and better integrating into Israeli society. And the support he's been gathering has become, according to my understanding, has become threatening for some of the patriarchs and heads of churches because we know that clericalism can really be a problem in the mainline denominations, where clerics, the clergy, just have almost total control over their flock. And this is odd for those of us who live in the US or other countries, because as a Catholic, of course, we respect the authority of our bishops, priests, and the clergy, but there's also Catholic organizations that work for all kinds of things, right? Pro-life and hospitals and schools. And so the clergy, they do their job in pastoral work, but it does not exclude lay organizations. And that's exactly what Ehab is saying. He's saying they do civil work, right, to better integrate Christians in society, help them find jobs, help them economically. And so it's not a competition with the patriarchs and heads of churches, but it seems like they're perceiving this as a type of encroachment upon maybe their control sounds a bit pejorative, but let's say their authority. And so Ehab certainly denies that from what I
But
discussed with
let me
him.
before the others respond, because it was a great interview. I'm glad you sent me the link and I had the time to watch it today. It it it, it seems unusual that one guy could be doing something that would be so upsetting
Yeah.
to a bunch of heads of churches in Jerusalem that that alone would trigger this. I mean, and like I said earlier, he's an Israeli citizen. He should be advocating
Yeah.
for his community the same way Mansour Abbas, as the head of the Islamic Ram party that sits in the Knesset, advocates for Muslim Arabs. Am I am I missing something? Surely you live
Mm.
here half the year. Do you see Todd, and you're here frequently? Anyone see anything? Could there be another reason? Or Andre, are you or is that it? Which I'll accept. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I liked what Andre said earlier that I think it's a bigger picture even than just Israel, Jerusalem, that these denominations, especially the Orthodox, from my travel around the Middle East, they're not just in Israel, they're all over and they're representing those in Jordan and Iraq and, Lebanon and in Egypt. And there's something of their their constituents or they're representing those outside of Israel. And so I think there's the division that they're speaking of would be, okay, we want there to be a holistic, like let's lower this Zionist, this Israel right to the land. Like that's very divisive. And the reality is, I mean, I'm not an expert, and Andre, you may know this more, or those of you that there, but just my experience is the majority of Arab Christians or Israeli Christians from the traditional churches are more born a Christian. They don't necessarily have a faith, as we would say as evangelical Christians or even Catholic, that's voluntary, it's revelatory, it's more of an identity. You're born either, just like Muslims. I have friends that are Muslim. They're born a Muslim. They didn't have a choice. They didn't all of a sudden have faith in Allah, or faith, and Christians likely as well, not just all of a sudden have faith in Jesus. They're born, it's an identity, and that's an identity that's throughout the Middle East. So it's very difficult it's offensive or it shakes up the status quo because you're born in a box and you stay in the box. And everyone in the Middle East, as long as you stay in your box, you're okay. But when you break out of that box, it shakes the whole ecosystem up. And I think some of this, like with Ihab and others, it can shake things up. And just from my own experience, even I remember sitting in Jordan for the first time, and I was speaking to a bunch of young leaders about Israel and about God's covenant with Abraham and just God's heart. And really, like Shirley was saying, it was about God's heart. And I had, there's two, main groups in Jordan. There's the Jordanians. They were kind of their family lines have lived there. And then there's Palestinian Jordanians, those that fought against Israel but had to leave Israel. They originally, their family lines were in Israel. But I was surrounded at lunch by all these Palestinian Jordanians telling me of their stories of all their land being taken and their homes taken. And, they didn't mention that their forefathers fought against Israel, and that's why, and they lost in the War of Independence. But I just realized, wow, they're believers in Jesus in Jordan, and they have faith like I do. They didn't grow up in a traditional, they weren't just born with that identity, but it was so hard for them to even consider that the Bible says the Jewish people
Yeah.
have a right to the land because of the pain. And we know in the Arab world there's this feeling like they're all cousins, even if they're born in Israel. Those are their family, the fellow Arabs, even if they're Muslim. It's there's just a sense of loyalty. And anyway, I've been spoken to the Arab, in Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, even the Iraqis, and it's just tender and gentle. It's hard if someone's real strong, proactive Zionist right away. It's really um, there's no conciliatory way of bridging that at that point. It's just in your face. So I better cut this off because it's hard for them to relate. Anyway, that's a long answer.
Thank you.
At the same time, that's a really good question, Jonathan. And to add to what Todd said, it's one man is spearheading the movement, but it's not just one man. Like I said, as of a few days ago, they had 18,000 followers, and there are other leaders in the movement. And what they're doing, they're really shaking a type of consensus, or at least an official consensus, that for decades and generations, there's been this talk of the Palestinian Christians, the Zionists are pushing them out of the land. Palestinians are one, Christians and Muslims, and that's been like the official narrative that's been propagated. I was in Israel 20 years ago, and many of the common Christians did not believe that. They said, yeah, this is nonsense. And they knew that if there was a threat, it was coming from the radical Muslims. And still, many Palestinians in the Palestinian territories in Syria and Lebanon would rather live under Israeli sovereignty, but they're afraid to say that because it might endanger their lives. So now you're seeing an organization, a man in an organization, and others who are actually saying this boldly, and they're saying we should be enlisting in the IDF and serving our country and defending Israel from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And so this is really shaking the core of this narrative that has been propagated for years, and that, again, many Western commentators are swallowing hook, line, and sinker, this thing that Israel is oppressing Christians and the population of Christians is declining in the Middle East. Well, it is, except in Israel, right? The number of Christians are actually growing in Israel, and it's the only country in the Middle East. So it's really shaking a narrative that was supposed to be established, but did not have really any strong foundations at all.
Well, there's a subtext to it as well, because when I was watching your conversation with him, I noticed that he said he's from Upper Nazareth, and I have friends, our Israeli Christian friends, who live there, and they were supposed to have been at my daughter's wedding, not that long ago, and their business was firebombed, and
Mm,
they and many other Christians, and this, by the way, as an Orthodox Israeli Jew, this is a shame that I bear that
yeah.
our Christian citizens are persecuted, but they're being persecuted by Muslim Israelis within the state of Israel. And I've had conversations, and as we're speaking, I'm going back at least 15, maybe even 20 years, close to it, that there has been a move for Christian Israelis to conscript in the army, to become more involved. And as Nicole said, it's a tremendously small minority within the population. Most Israelis have never met a Christian person because of that. And I'm just wondering, of course, he's going to be targeted, but but it seems to me that now if he's doing something, that he's being targeted not only by the church but also by his Muslim neighbors, which is actually potentially life threatening. Having said what, one of you were going to make a comment. I want to move along, but Nicole, go ahead,
I
please.
have to step in because it's we cannot just say that exclusively that Christians are being forced out or persecuted by Muslims.
No,
There are attacks on a daily basis against Christians by Jews in Jerusalem. This is happening, and this is actually documented by an Israeli Jew who is very much an advocate for Christians
yeah,
here in Israel. And she set up a hotline. She set up a volunteer group that goes and escorts the Christians. So listen, we really have to be careful to say, first of all, Ehab, what he's doing is not theological, it's political. And that's fine. And he can do whatever he wants. It's his right, even as a citizen and as somebody who served in the army. Of course, he should do what he feels is the best to do for his community. There is another Israeli Christian who's doing the same thing, who's also in the army. He's also in the north, and he's also doing a similar thing, like getting the language and getting Christians involved. Getting the language recognized, Aramaic, but also getting Christians involved, trying to recruit them into the army. Now, this is still a minority of a minority, and also you have to look at the geography. The Arabs that live in the north, the Christians that are there, have a different upbringing and lifestyle than the ones who live in the Palestinian territories and in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, it is not as accepted, and for the Christians have not integrated. The minorities here have not integrated in this city as much as in the north. There's a different lifestyle. There's different traditions, different expectations, different politics, different history for Jerusalem as opposed to the north. Also, I would say that we're talking about Christian Zionism as if it's something that actually is an obsession of these Christians. But I think, or
right.
like obviously it came out in the statement. Clearly, they were upset by it, but it's not necessarily, like, I would say Ehab's form of Zionism isn't even Christian. I mean, maybe I'll watch Andre's interview and find out, but it's political. It's definitely political because if he integrates more into Israel and the land of Israel, his life will also, it be probably easier, be better. So in that case, I could see there's a lot of politics involved. Look who he's meeting and what he's doing. Now, why would the churches be upset about that? Because they have navigated a very delicate political issue for centuries here. And for them, who are working on, getting recognition, stopping the attacks, and also maintaining their status quo and their rights here, that to have somebody who is acting on their own for more integration with Israel, it's actually putting them in a bad light. So I can see why they would be upset. Now, do I think that they came up with the right conclusion? I'd have to read the statement again. I also have Ehab's statement here, but I think just to see where they're coming from, to get their perspective and how they are living a challenged lifestyle, more so, especially in Jerusalem, and more so because traditional Christians, like the clergy, look like clergy. They wear robes, they wear crosses, different hats. I am a Christian. You can't maybe tell when I walk around the streets here that I'm a Christian, so I don't get attacked. So I think we need to be very mindful that the attacks come from all sides, and that the Christians are pressed from all sides, not exclusively
Right.
one.
But but I want to come to the statement, which is still singling out Christian Zionism. It's not talking about attacks on Christians. We're talking about Christian Zionism. And maybe let's use this as the jumping off point to get into some of the theological issues where I'm going to get over my head, and that's fine. That's why you're all here. But the statement refers to dangerous ideologies, plural, but it only mentions one ideology. The statement is signed, and that's Christian Zionism. It refers to local individuals, plural, we don't know who those are. And there's only one person that has come up in this conversation, though a lot of people are referring to Mike Evans and the big event that took place here last month with 1,000 Christian leaders coming, right? But again, it's very vague. It's a public statement. It wasn't, I don't know. And Andre, you had a conversation with him. I wonder if any of you, I always have to look at the title. Heads of churches in Jerusalem picked up the phone and called him and said, "Hey, you're upsetting us. You're rocking the boat. Let's have a conversation and coffee and see what we can do." But it was not. My sense is it wasn't that. And if it was about him, there was a public statement, which in and of itself has been chided. It says that they assert that they are the only. I don't know if it's their specific language in the statement, the only legitimate representatives of Christianity in the Holy Land.
Yeah.
I know that's upset a lot of evangelicals. There was one other thing, but then the and Andre, you said, and maybe I'll just conclude on this point and open it up, that there was really nothing theological in there. So it was sort of like someone writing a letter and laying out a bunch of landmines. I'd like
Yeah.
to ask you all to help me unpack it from a theological perspective. If we're talking about, we don't know who, right? We don't know who wrote it. We don't know who specifically it's about, but we know that we're focusing on Christian Zionism as a harmful and as the harmful and dangerous ideology. So what I'd like to ask you, I'm assuming you are all identified as Christian Zionists, is why is that in fact harmful and damaging? You refer to Christian Zionism as harmful and dangerous. Todd?
So, oh,
Shirley, go.
so I'm really glad that Nicole and Andre can fill in the backstory, some of the backstory of this letter. But when I saw the letter, to me, it's just another example of 2,000 years of replacement theology's hold on the church. And its doctrines still does not see the Jewish people as the covenantal people, everlasting covenantal people with God. So to me, it's still a church doctrinal issue.
Yeah.
It's the same old stuff, right? It's the same old stuff. It hasn't changed. But my favorite thing for the past, I don't know, 10 years is actually that letter out of Vatican, published in 2015, saying the gifts and the callings of God are irrevocable. And to me, it's tremendously important. That's a letter came out 50 years after the Nostra Aetate anniversary. That letter actually emphasized God's unbroken covenant with Israel and affirming that Judaism as the roots of Christianity, and also stated that the church neither conducts or supports institutional missions to convert Jews. I mean, that's huge. Okay, that's huge. So that came out of Catholic Church. That's huge. For ever since Vatican II.
Does that
but then when I saw that letter, I was thinking, what happened? Are we walking backwards? So to me, they don't quite connect. That's why I was asking, is the Roman Catholic also part of this statement? Because it doesn't quite connect with what they said in 2015, where they recognized God's gifts and calling for the Jewish people are irrevocable. So yeah, so that's my feeling when I saw the letter. And also earlier I said that Zionism is a New Testament idea also. Okay, it's continuity. The continuity in the Bible from the Hebrew scripture to the Christian scripture is so amazing. The message is continuous. It doesn't change. And especially when Jesus said in book of Luke, chapter 21, 24, in our teaching, we always go back to that, where he said they will fall by the sword and they will be taken as prisoners to all nations. So that's the diaspora, right? For the Jewish people. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of Gentiles are fulfilled. And so, sure enough, there's the Byzantines and the Mamluks and the Crusaders. Doesn't matter, Jews or Muslims trampling on Jerusalem, all Gentiles. But Jesus said until. So it says it will end. Even though he didn't say Jewish people will come home, the Israel will be restored, even though he didn't say that, but that one sentence with that until says that Jews will come home. And the Gentiles, doesn't matter Christians or Muslims, all Gentiles trampling the land, and that will finish. And so he is talking, Jews, it's rightful land for Jews to come home, and it will again be a Jewish homeland. And so it really is, Zionism is part of Jesus' teaching. And so to me, that's the doctrine, the old doctrine where they do not see the Jewish people in God's kingdom. They do not see it. If they see it, then it will be different.
Or in the text.
Or in the text, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Andre, Shirley asked something specific about Catholicism, and Paul Agno is asking a question whether Catholics are officially Zionist. As our token Catholic in the room, would you care to address those?
You saw me smiling a lot during Shirley's reply because she said really a lot of good things, and would take a while to really unpack everything. So I'm just trying to remember everything she said to at least address most of it adequately. I think Shirley, you're right on target by saying behind this strange declaration there is a theological battle that lurks below the surface. And that's why it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The vague accusations, the lack of signature, just branding Christian Zionism as a harmful ideology without defining it. But I think you're right that there is this theological battle that has been going on for about 2,000 years now, really since the time of the New Testament. And so as a Catholic, I'm well aware of my heritage. And by the way, I'm a revert. So I was an evangelical for 7 years, and then I returned to the church. And I really grappled with this question of Zionism. And can one be a Catholic Zionist? And obviously my answer is yes, because I'm one of them. And so first, the dichotomy between this statement and the 2015 statement, which was released, I believe, by the Commission for the Relations with the Jews. So that was produced and published by Rome. So welcome to the world of church politics, where we have, in Judaism, they say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It's not really all that different in the church, right? So you have, on the one hand, the Commission for the Relations with the Jews, which publishes this document quoting St. Paul, and it's a rich theological document that just basically reaffirms what St. Paul says in Romans 9-11, that God made a covenant with the Jewish people. He did not revoke it. God still has a plan for them in God's plan of salvation. Since Nostra Aetate, the Second Vatican Council, the church affirms almost nonstop that God still has a plan for the Jewish people. And so this is why this statement from the patriarchs and heads of churches is just not theological at all, because first, there's no substance to it. And second, clearly there's a pragmatic and political intent behind it. There's a type of threat against the authority of the heads of churches. And of course, there are deep roots of supersessionism that are not so easily uprooted from Middle Eastern churchmen, right? So that's why you feel that dichotomy. So which one is closer to the faith of the church? For sure, it's the 2015 document. Now, this said, it is absolutely true that it is hard to find avowed Catholic Zionists nowadays, because there is not a long tradition of support for Zionism in the Catholic Church. Why? Because on the one hand, the church says, the church affirms the role of the Jewish people in salvation history. God has not rejected his people. But again, you have these diplomatic concerns of the Christians in the Middle East and the tradition of supersessionism. So Catholics almost always stop short of saying the covenant is irrevocable Therefore, this must mean that all the promises of the land still have a purpose. So we're having a problem of excessive spiritual exegesis. Supersessionist theology says that everything is fulfilled in Jesus and the church, right? But that's simply not true. When you read all the prophecies, Isaiah says all the nations will come to Zion and they will not lift sword against one another, and the wolf will lie with the lamb. I mean, many of the prophecies are not fulfilled, right? So you can't say that everything's fulfilled in Jesus and in the church. And what has struck me about all the commentators, including Michael Knowles, who's a brilliant Catholic commentator,
Yeah.
usually very thoughtful on everything, but I thought his commentary on this controversy was, sorry, Michael, but really lame. Like, I've been looking at pro-Zionist commentaries and pro the Declaration, anti-Zionists, and what struck me is that most of the commentaries that supported the Declaration were completely void of any kind of theological depth. Most of them did not refer to Scripture at all, to the prophets, to what you just mentioned from Luke, Jesus' own words in Luke about Jerusalem being trampled by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. And I found a lot of really thoughtful, deep commentaries on the deep biblical and traditional roots of Zionism. So you're just hearing a lot of Catholics just say, like Michael Knowles, oh no, we don't believe that, but they don't really have any substance to it. And this points to what you're saying, Shirley, that I think is absolutely true. There is a deep tradition of supersessionism that the church has rejected, but many Catholics are just having a hard time making that extra step to say, well, first, can you please just start reading the prophets? I teach Old Testament. I'm teaching the prophets now. It's like, please, Catholics, the Bible is not a Protestant book. It's supposed to be our book as well. So just start reading the prophets. Go to Catholics for Israel. I have a list of 176 prophecies that speak of the return of the Jews to the land. I don't think it's a Protestant idea. It's certainly not a dispensationalist idea that just dates back to the 19th century. It goes back to the New Testament and the Hebrew
Right.
Scriptures.
Excellent.
Done with my
Todd.
rant.
Actually, met quite a few Catholics in Poland who are Zionists. So
There are
so
some.
yeah, there are some. Mhm.
Todd, you're in Nashville. If you go outside and throw a rock, you're more likely to hit a Christian Zionist than not. How do you think, how do you think that this statement would play on the streets in Nashville? And what's your response to it
Yeah.
theologically?
Well, I think that it'd be offensive. I think that some of even the wording I think Andre just referenced, it feels very condemning and it's actually a political statement, is what it feels like. I was just highlighting, their word about these undertakings found favor among political actors in Israel and beyond to seek push a political agenda. It's almost like if you look at there's fear behind this statement that they're actually advancing politically more than we are. They're getting more, it's almost this insecurity coming out, and the individuals have been welcomed at official levels, both locally and internationally. And maybe in that room at Herzog's house, when you have and I have friends that were there, there were Arab Christians that were there, and my evangelical Israeli friends were there as well, and Jewish Christians, if you say it that way, were in that room, and maybe they looked around and said, "Wow, there's some favor going on here that's not us." There's a little bit of that insecurity, and then they represent church as their flock and matters pertaining. Then the statement just saying we are the ones that have, we alone have represent the churches and the flock, and so it's this feels like there's control there. I think in Tennessee so I think Christian Zionism in US particularly, but even around the world, there's different levels. And some is, unfortunately, I think some is primarily a political or even social. It's almost, there isn't a lot of content, as Andre was saying, there isn't a lot of scriptures that they all know. And even you see interviews on TV when they're challenged, they don't have a lot of scriptures. But there is this consensus. I feel like God is doing something in the body of Christ where there's a choice that is need that has to be answered. This question is, what will you do with Israel? What it's like there's the passivity is no longer an option.
Are
And
you
I
saying
think
that that's sort of a litmus test to your own Christianity?
to me personally, I feel a personal call to help the evangelical church and even across the lines of different denominations to understand the relevant to bring the scriptures out of Genesis 15, Genesis 17, this unconditional covenant and everlasting covenant. Psalm 105 repeated all that in Ezekiel 36 again, and then in Romans 11 it's not revocable. That the church doesn't understand. I think there's a lot of ignorant replacement theology. And then but bringing the scriptures, like even in Jordan and Iraq, when I'm sharing with Christians in the Middle East, they're just like, wait, that's not in the Bible. No, that's not. And we look at it and the truth speaks for itself. So I think there's a growing grassroots organic awakening and the different Christian Zionists, there's different expressions of that. Some is political, some's buying the flags and doing Shabbat and doing the feast. But for me, it's like, let's get founded on the scripture, and then your expression of it is up to you. But that's what I'm concerned about with this statement is it's like throwing it's using this term Christian Zionism and just saying it's this posturing political favor and it's just like it's just not a biblical solid
Yeah.
foundational theology and truth. It, as Andre said, it's for us evangelicals. If you throw away God's promise to Israel, you have nowhere to stand. Like, how does any of the promises of my salvation in the new, because the New Testament is not separate from the Old Testament, it's a continuation. Jesus is Jewish. The question in the book of Acts is, are you now going to restore the kingdom to Israel? That was by Jesus's followers. It's still, the future is still connected to Israel with Christianity. So I just feel like my challenge would be look at scripture. Not let's avoid this is like a clickbait a little bit of this all being political and all being like keeping the political peace, keeping everybody from becoming Zionist because of the ramifications. But I'm Zionist because of Jesus, because of the Bible. And I've been to Israel 70 times and I'm going around the world. I was in Korea, I was in Egypt in the last 45 days, sharing about God's heart for Israel with people that are just going, we never saw that. And I have all these Koreans coming to Israel next month, leaders in the church there and missions, because they never saw it. And they're like, we need to go. And the same in Egypt. I saw these, I mean, you're talking about Muslim background believers, all these ones that are just like, this is the Bible and this is my Jesus and he's Jewish. And so I think this is going to grow. And I think the church, just like Nazi Germany, the believers that stood with the Jewish people were on fire. The Corrie Ten Booms, they afterwards they have authority and they just had influence because they were walking intimately with their God, who's a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But
Yeah.
the church, the 90% Lutheran and Catholic German church that was passive and the Holocaust happened right in front of them, were deceived and really embraced the Nazism. And I think that the world everyone is going to need to face this because the world's going to get so anti-Israel, not just anti-Semitic, but
You,
anti-Zion.
you mean even
Anti-Zion is
more?
from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. It's actually, let's destroy Israel. That's anti-Zionism. That's what's so scary. Because if you look at the other side of this is, okay, we're not Christian Zionists, or then we're anti. It's this defense to destroy Israel, and you're okay with it.
Well, Todd, I mean that's a lot. That's a lot to respond to, but I'm going to use it as a segue to begin to segue out. There was something that you just said, my phrase, and I think it's a reasonable inference from what you were saying that how a Christian stands vis-a-vis Israel is the litmus test of his or her faith. There's too many. We've talked about some, and people are putting in the comments here for Victoria. Thank you, Victoria. For Zion's sake, I will not be silent. We can go on. In fact, that would be interesting to do, although it's probably been done. Just putting those scriptural references from Old and New Testament there. Victoria Sarvati made a comment here, which is interesting and kind of touches on a broader social thing that I think is important. She writes that she has a friend who wore a lapel pin of the Israeli and American flags at an airport in the United States. A man got in her face and yelled explicatives and asked if she was one of those, quote, Jew-loving Christians. This is not an isolated case. Yes, and I feel that, and I'm concerned because I'm an identifiable Jew when I'm traveling in American airports and beyond. And I guess what I feel, and maybe I want to use this to segue toward the wrapping up of the conversation, which could go on for a number of hours, is that I always find it disturbing. It's interesting to me that the lightning rod for this of this statement and for this conversation was Christian Zionists, and I always get upset when Zionists are referred to as Jews, because it's now become, specifically in the last couple of years, much more synonymous to call out Zionists. I don't hate Jews, I just hate Zionists. And that's anti-Semitic all the same. To me, and I hope one thing that will come out of this conversation, all of these conversations, is that Christians will affirm that yes, indeed, that they're Zionists. And when you're speaking of Zionism and the right of the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel, that they ascribe to that. And it's not a Jewish thing, it's a biblical thing that we all subscribe to. I apologize to the four of you because we've only scratched the surface with each of you. And that was my mistake in only having three of you, but I could have had four of you, but I could have had four more. There's so many thoughts, there's so many theories. I will commit that as a follow-up to everyone who's registered, and in the program notes for this, we will put a lot of resources so people can read and follow up and become educated, and to the extent that there's interest from all these people who are here, we'll do something like this again. But I'd like to ask, before I bring up two people to kind of finally wrap up, I always like to give my guests the last word. We've covered a lot of territory. There's a lot of things about this statement that are problematic on many different levels, certainly theologically. There's a lot of interesting comments as to what's happened as a result of it, the backlash. And Andre, I'm glad you mentioned Michael Knowles. I'll put his video. It was sad that that's the best that he was able to put forth. And I want to just ask you, and we'll go back in alphabetical order from how we started. What did you want to amplify? I'm going to ask you to keep it brief because I still have two other people I want to bring up for concluding remarks. What did we cover that you want to amplify, or what did we not cover that you just want to put out there as a cliffhanger? Shirley.
Can I just read three little verses out of Isaiah?
Yeah.
So that's my ending. This is from Isaiah chapter 60, verse 10, 11, and 12. It says, foreigners will build your walls, and that their kings will serve you. Though in anger I struck you, in favor I will show you compassion. He's talking to his people here. Your gates will always stand open. They will never be shut day or night, so that men may bring you the wealth of the nations. Their king led the triumphal procession. Verse 12, for the nations or the kingdom that will not serve you will perish. It will be utterly ruined. So may it be a warning for the nations. This is what God has in mind about Jerusalem. And the other thing is, when Christians read scripture, often they don't separate Gentiles and Jews. And so there's a huge separation there. And this is, God talking to the nation.
Thank you. Nicole,
Israel.
last
Yes.
comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's the last because I wanted to respond to a lot of things. I feel like that there's a lot of criticism of what the church has said and their theology, and that is, entirely opinion, to, whatever your opinion is and whatever your theology. Now, I think what is more important to me and in my journey of living here for 20 plus years and getting to know the indigenous Christian community is that Western Christianity comes with a lot of arrogance, and we have to understand that these Christians have, just like, the Christian Zionists say that the Jews have held, the word and the law of God for us for generations that we are now rooted into as Christians. Well, these Christians have also been minorities in the land for so long and persecuted for so long. And I feel like that, despite the politics of, this statement and what's going on, and I think we really stumbled into, and probably nobody intended it to spark these kind of firefights here, around the world, the Twitter storm that basically happened. I think it would behoove us, as especially as Christians, I'm speaking mainly to Christians, is to understand our other Christian brothers, because ultimately we are supposed to be brothers and sisters in the Lord. And we need to understand the other narratives and the other views, and why. Because for them, Christian Zionism, despite your theology, and like, your theology may be right, but their viewpoint of Christian Zionism, a regular Christian here that has grown up here, excludes the indigenous people, and they're here for generations. It justifies the state of Israel in anything that, God forbid, Israel would do wrong, because, by the way, Israel's not perfect. It may justify land annexation, and for them, it's a bigger. It has a lot larger implications for them in their daily lives than it may have for a Christian Zionist cheering from overseas. So I think it is extremely important to understand the local Christian viewpoint. And when 1,000 Christians came here, all paid for by the Israeli government at the behest of the Israeli government, they did not visit or meet one local believer, not one. And it's not necessarily their fault, but I think that awareness needs to be raised of the Christians in the land, and bridges need to be built. And I'm
So
not
wait,
saying this is an Israel
Nicole,
thing, it's a
I,
Christian thing.
that's
Mhm.
fine, but I just want to interrupt. I know I said last comments, but does that make does that make Christian Zionism a harmful and damaging ideology? Or,
I
or,
said I'm
or,
not going to address the statement, but what has been the repercussions of this statement is to make it you're Zionist or not Zionist, or all, if you don't believe like me, you're bad and not worthy of even being a believer. Whereas, just to understand that for them, Christian Zionism has become a politically harmful issue for them, for their lives, for their daily lives. Yes.
okay. Who goes next alphabetically? Todd McDowell.
I appreciate your heart, Nicole, and I just would agree that love is the key, and that according to Scripture, we're one. We're one body, and it doesn't matter our background. And I've cried with my Palestinian Christian friends, and I feel, they all the limitations some of them have, they're born on the wrong side of the fence, and it's very difficult for them to live their faith and the persecution from their community and their family. And
Right.
so I do think that's a good kind of sobering and healthy humility for us to have in the midst of this. And at the same time, I just want to emphasize, I think one of the things I appreciate about Jonathan the most is that you are relational and you are consistent, you're faithful, and you're not just trying to get, some quick clicks or some quick notoriety, but you're humble, and and I feel like that example of us with as a Christian Zionist to have a relationship with my Jewish friends in the Knesset, friends on the streets, friends in Tel Aviv, friends Orthodox friends, secular friends. Like it's about relationships. And then as well, our Christian friends, just walking in relationship. So I don't know these fathers and these patriarchs personally, but I think so even some of my strong comments previously, I need to be careful because I don't know them and they're making statements and they didn't sign their name, but I just think judgment, I just want to ask forgiveness if I was in any judgmental words. But at the same time, I think I want to stand. So my last comment would be, I just think we have to stand on God's word. There has to be a common foundation as Christians. And I just want to read Psalm 105, 8 to 11 says, He remembers his covenant forever, the word that he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham, his sworn promise to Isaac, which he confirmed to Jacob as a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, lasts forever, saying, To you I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for an inheritance. And if God's not faithful to his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that's lasts forever, he's not going to be faithful to all the promises that I live my whole life on. And I just feel as Christians, there's his faithfulness to Israel and the Jewish people is directly connected to his faithfulness to us. And I would leave it with that.
Thank you, Todd. Andre.
Yeah, great comments from all three of you, and especially Nicole. I really appreciate your comments. I'm glad you said that. I think it was a good counterbalance to the Zionist fan club here on this panel, and I think
Always
it's
the
very important.
journalist.
Yeah, exactly right. Devil's advocate. I think
Mhm.
what you said is absolutely true, that especially evangelical Christians tend to be completely disconnected from the churches in the land. Many go to Israel, they don't even step foot in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or they have no idea of what are their concerns. And as I was saying to Ihab yesterday, it's not a problem to criticize the state of Israel or things that the settlers are doing, right? And I know the Armenian community has had some serious difficulties with some of the Orthodox Jews. But usually you can get a sense whether you're doing this either as an insider or out of love or out of hatred, right? And when I heard yesterday Ihab direct some real criticism towards the government of Israel, I was like, yeah, I mean, you have every right to make these criticisms, as every Jew has criticisms against the government of Netanyahu and company. Um, but what you're seeing in a lot of in the blogosphere on social media, you're just seeing these clueless commentators who have barely been to Israel at all, and they just level. It's not critique; it's anti-Semitism. I'm thinking of LifeSite News that they've been driving me crazy for the last 2 years or more. And it's one Israel slamming after another. So, for my concluding statement, I would like to connect this controversy with another controversy from just a few months ago, the one between Senator Cruz and Tucker Carlson about
Yeah.
Genesis 12. I will bless those who bless you, which Tucker really challenged Senator Cruz about that. The senator didn't even know where in the Bible was that verse. And so, if any of you listening are not familiar, it's basically the promise to Abraham, which is found in many other places in the Bible where Christian Zionists understand this as those who bless Israel will be blessed. And I don't know why this would be controversial. I mean, is it ever a problem to bless others? As Christians, wouldn't we want to be agents of blessing to everyone that we find? So you want to bless the Palestinian Christians, by all means, do it, right? You want to bless Israel as a state, do it. You want to bless Gazans and give them help, please do it. But blessing is not kind of slamming the other side and hating the other side. And unfortunately, this is what I've seen among a lot of Catholic commentators. Many of them seem to have nothing else to do but to say, well, criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism, and all they do is criticize Israel. Well, do you ever actually say something against anti-Semitism? So my message to, well, I suppose to evangelicals, like I said, echoing Nicole, it's like get to know the Christians in the Holy Land, and not just evangelicals, but the traditional, more apostolic churches. And to Catholics, as I said before, listen, the prophets are your book as well. Please read the Old Testament. Please read the Gospels, and don't just say the church says, or the church is the new Israel and that's it. By the way, the new Israel does not appear anywhere in the entire Bible. The new or true Israel, it's a made up concept, right? It's not something that Jesus or Paul taught. So please, Catholics, don't just repeat mindlessly, this is what we believe. We don't believe in Zionism. It's just Protestant dispensationalism. Please engage with the scriptures and read the documents of the church from Nostra Aetate to the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable, and pray for wisdom and humility and truly be a blessing both to the Christians in the Holy Land in Israel, but also to the Jewish people and to the state of Israel, trying to see God's providence behind this great movement.
Amazing. Thank you, Shirley, Nicole, Todd, Andre. Amazing. At this point, I want to call up my friend Guidon Ariel. Typically, at the end of my webinars, which have a mix of Jewish and Christian audiences and panelists, I will have a pastor friend or somebody close in with comments and prayers. But since you're all Christian, literally on my screen, I'm seeing me on one end and Guidon on the other end. So we're the bookends as the Orthodox Jews. And Guidon, you've been watching and you even rescheduled another meeting to be part of this conversation. I would love it if you want to make any quick closing observations, and then you close us in prayer.
Thank you very much, my good friend Jonathan. And I'm also delighted to see my friends Shirley and Nicole and my new friends Todd and Andre. I hope to reach out to you, Todd and Andre, and to become good friends with you as well. This was, at first, Jonathan, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to participate because I wasn't really paying too much attention, even though many of my Jewish and Christian friends were saying, "Oh my goodness, my goodness, my goodness," and this is why you had this event. But frankly, I was following more this week the tragedy in Jerusalem where two babies, two toddlers were I think toddlers is even right. They were 3 and 6 month olds that unfortunately
Infants.
died in their caretaker homes. So it was a big tragedy, and that's we've been looking at throughout this week, and especially since, as has been mentioned here, this statement was not even signed by anybody, and I'm very sensitive to people not signing things. But I definitely think that anytime, you know what they say, if it's Jews, it's news. So if it's Israel and Palestine, then it's how do you rhyme news with Palestine? But in general, I think that we are getting more and more to the situation of people who are pro-Israel are going to hopefully stay pro-Israel. People who are anti-Israel are going to stay, unfortunately, anti-Israel. And people in the middle, it really depends on how strong the social media reach of whichever comment, not commenter, whichever poster is posting, and especially how many anti-Israel commentators are showing themselves over here, and that is really the shame. And I hope that people will learn to be more discerning. Discerning is a word that I hear a lot from my Christian friends, and I think that not only Christians have to be discerning, but any consumer of media, especially social media, have to learn to do. It's not something that just comes naturally with mother's milk. But I definitely think that this event, Jonathan, thank you for it, because it is raising awareness of that, and of the things that are happening in Israel that all of us must recognize. Did I spend enough time or too much time already?
That was a great observation. Now you get to close us in prayer somehow. What do we need
So
to pray for?
I'd like to share some of and I'd also like to give a shout out and hi to my friend Paul Lengo, who made a few comments on the questions that I saw. So hi, Paul. If anybody else wants me to say hi, then you have to ask a question so I can see that you're here. I think that it's very special that you've invited these people here today, Jonathan. I don't see how many people who are watching, but I hope that you've all gotten a little bit more discerning here. And I will really pray that more people will be discerning, more people will not be just biting your head off with whichever side you're on, and reach out to your friends in Israel, whether you already know them, and especially if you don't know them. I always try to help ask people to reach out to me. Get on Ariel, find me on Google or on Facebook, and let us pray that while this is something that has brought out some concern, if I can use that word as an understatement, let us pray that it will help people to become closer to what God has in mind, whatever that might be. I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet, and all of us will as the word I heard relationship before, all of us will reach out to have better relationships with those like us, and especially those not like us.
Thank you. And again, Nicole, Shirley, Todd, and Andre, thank you so much. Before I just conclude with the people that I need to thank, in addition, I want to make note that if anyone wants to participate in the next live webinar that we're planning, I have the privilege of hosting a town hall on Israel with the Republican and conservative candidates for U.S. Senate from the state of North Carolina. That'll take place on Wednesday, the 4th of February, 8 a.m. Eastern. I don't know what time, 3 p.m. here in Israel. There will be an announcement sent out about that, but it's an exciting privilege and opportunity that I've been given, and certainly the issue of Zionism and, uh, and Christian Zionism indirectly will come up in that conversation. So you can be in touch for more information on that. We have to acknowledge our sponsors. First of all, the Willow Run Greenhouse in Culpeper, Virginia. If you're ever in the area, I always tell people stop in and thank them for helping make provocative conversations like this possible. And also our friends, the Coin family, for their meaningful sponsorship. Inspiration from Zion and all of the Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please consider joining us to help continue the dialogue and build bridges. And today, as we speak, on the 22nd of January, 2026. I will add a prayer in conclusion in this episode. I have the privilege of sponsoring it in honor of the brave people in Iran who are fighting like hell for their freedom, and I pray that they will succeed. And I pray that by the time this is widely received and viewed and heard all over the media, that Iran will be free and they will have their lives and their land back. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode in honor of memory of a loved one or special occasion, please be in touch at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your comments always as part of a dialogue and invite you to send any questions specifically about traditional Judaism for our Ask the Rabbi programs. Please share this with others who also find interest, and continue to join us right here where we bring you more meaningful conversations about unique topics relating to Israel that you won't hear anywhere else. Wherever you are in the world, I pray that you and your loved ones are safe and healthy, and I send my blessings from right here in the Judean mountains. God bless.